Hello, everybody. Welcome. Okay, let's get started. So, hello, everybody. Good afternoon. This is the Arts and Humanities Education Projects, also known as AHEP Workshop number 2. This is a series of workshops that we're doing to educate the general public on the application process and the grant for the Arts and Humanities and Education projects at the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. My name is Mauricio Pita. I'm a grant management specialist here at the Commission. My contact information, as you can see, is right there on the screen. You can take a screenshot, you can take a photo of it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have throughout your application process, particular about compliance, questions about deadlines, the process. I'm happy to follow up with you if you have questions about your project and you want to see if it's eligible or not. I'm very happy to support you in this process. Um, and we have a lot to cover, but in any moment, please feel free to, post a question in the chat, or pause, if you want to interrupt. I'm going to allow some time for questions, in particular sections of this presentation, but please do not be shy if something comes up and you need to write it in the chat. I'm looking at it. If you see me looking to the side, is because I have a second screen where I have attendees in the chat as well. Okay. So for the agenda for today, we're going to be looking at basically an overview of guidelines, eligibility, and what you can spend money on and what you cannot spend the funds on, some of the application process and the documents that we require. We'll talk a little bit about the grants portal, which is new this year. It's called Submittable. We'll talk about work samples and support materials and sort of how the paneling process kind of works, as well as some timelines on notifications and payments and etc. And then, of course, I will allocate some time at the end for some questions. Last time I went over a little bit, so I'm happy to stay and answer questions. But I want to be mindful of your time. So, before we start, if you're interested in being a panelist, we're always looking for panelists. They're an essential part of our process. Um, they are the ones that actually provide the comments and the scores of the application. We don't decide, we as staff, excuse me, don't decide on what applications or what projects move forward. The panelists rank the applications, and then from that, we make a decision. But we were always looking for people. So there's a stipend at the end of the process. If you're interested, you can scan the QR code. And I would love to have you be a part of it. Of course, not of this cohort. It would have to be you would have to be reviewing a different grant program if you're applying for AHEP, right? Would create a conflict. Um, and I will start with a land acknowledgement. We like to always recognize the Nacotchtank and Piscataway people. I apologize. The first resident of the land that would become the District of Columbia. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes and hope for a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations that can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We stand on the ancestral lands of the Natchitoches and Piscataway people. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that brings us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events, and to use such truths to guide the legacy of this Arts Commission. If you have a need to translate the website, or if you have a reasonable accommodation, Google Translate is available in the website. There's a section on the top right corner where you can select a different language. I think it's top right or top left. But if you require a special accommodation, we have a contact that can help you with that we can assess how we can support you best. Our goal is to make sure that there are no barriers to applying for this grant. We want to be able to provide equitable access. The contact is in the screen right now is CAH accessibility at dc.gov. But we do ask that you give us about 5 business days before the start before you're submitting your application or to give us enough time for us to provide you with a solution. Okay. Um, and yes, please use the chat. Questions that we get all the time are sort of sampled in that screen. And those are great questions to post in the chat. Especially if you're new or if you have applied it before, things change or sometimes it's been a long time. Happy to answer any and all questions. Okay, so the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, for those who are not familiar, was first established in 1968. The DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities is an independent agency in the District of Columbia government that basically evaluates and initiates action on matters relating to the arts and humanities and encourages the programs and the development of programs that promote progress in the arts and humanities. Our goal is not just to fund different projects. Our goal is to also advocate and to ensure that the arts have an important role in the economic life in the District of Columbia. We are basically the designated state arts agency for the District of Columbia, and we are supported primarily through district government funds, like taxpayer funds, and also in part by the National Endowment of the Arts. So AHEP, the Arts and Humanities Education Project. So what are the goals of this particular grant? So this grant is aiming to provide high quality arts and humanities experiences to strengthen the value of an arts and humanities education as a critical component of education and support the activities that are consistent with local and national learning standards for arts and humanities education. And so the way that we break this down is by creating different types of projects. So we have in-school projects which are for youth that are pre-K and 12 settings. Out-of-school time projects for youth in pre-K through 12 settings. That can be a summer program. It could be an after-school program. We also like to support professional development opportunities for classroom educators and also community-based learning for older adults ages 50 plus. Organizations, this is an organizational grant, not an individual grant, may apply up to $30,000 in support. And we're going to discuss a little bit more on those types of projects in a second. So what is an in-school project, right? These are projects and activities that take place within the traditional school day. They can, so if you have a DCPS school, you as an arts organizations are going to go into the school during the school time and provide arts education, right? They can include artist residencies, field trips, arts integration opportunities. It is important that the project is connected to curricular standards and actual institutional programs that are occurring in the schools. Um, and we emphasize assessment and evaluation, which should emphasize an intentional and comprehensive design. Um, Out of school projects are activities that happen after that traditional time period, right? So after school, during a weekend, like a weekend project, summer camps, right? They sometimes can happen in a school premise, but they're not facilitated by school personnel, right? So a feeder program that goes, an after school program that goes and teaches acting to students, and at the end of the program, they do a play. That would be considered an out-of-school time project. Priority is given to programming that engages participants multiple times throughout the year. So a one-time visit, a three-time visit, it's just, you could apply, but it's just not enough, right? We ask that the programs meet more than once, something that's consistent. I'm going to make sure that my Teams is not bothering me so much. But I don't know how to do that. So we'll just move on. And sorry, guys, just had to uh, unlock this for a second. Apologies. because it's just bothering me, you know? I don't want that. Okay, great. All right. Can everybody see the slideshow? Yeah. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. And I know I'm moving fast, but here we go. Great. So professional development opportunities, right? These are opportunities that enhance training for for educators in a school setting, right? So you can explore an integration of arts education if you are a visual art program and you want to train educators on how to incorporate visual art and math in a math classroom, right? Or utilizing theater as a form of um, and an English class, right? These are ways that that professional development project could potentially work. They're particularly for teaching artists serving DCPS or DCPCS. Um, but it's, of course, classroom educators and instructional staff is going to be the population that you will be serving in those opportunities. And lastly, the projects for older adults. These are culturally relevant and experiential to advance the engagement of older adults, which is 50 plus in the arts and humanities. I consider 50 very young still. Activities that take place within senior centers and or residential facilities of some kind. Um, and the most important thing is that your program must identify a population to serve. And of course, it's better if you have a partnership in place. Um, the application timeline, right? So the application opened on June 23rd, and it'll close on July 24th. The award announcement usually happens at the beginning of October, sometimes October 1st. It depends on budget and it depends on vetting of a lot of the sort of paperwork of different grant applications. Sometimes we have delays, and so, but usually no later than like the middle of October. So a couple of things. Incomplete or late applications or applications that do not follow the instructions and guidelines may be deemed ineligible for review and funding. We get a ton of applications, so we have to find a way to sort of vet here. Prospective applicants should read through the request for applications, the RFA, completely before submitting an application. The RFA is available on the website. And I really recommend reading throughout. It's only 19 pages. It's not that extensive, but it gives you a lot of tools and a lot of information. I see a question in the chat. I'm going to respond after I'm done with this. But applicants must be up to date with reporting requirements on prior CAH grants. So if you still have to do a final report for FY26 or for FY25, or if you are missing a clean hands or something, or you're missing a compliant element in your current grant, you must reach out to us to ensure that you are up to date with everything. And an organization must apply with one project, right? If you're an organization and you have multiple education projects and you want to apply with all of them, just select the one that you think could be the best fit for this particular program. And all of the applications are due by 5 p.m. Applications, like I said before, are reviewed and scored by a panel of arts professionals like yourselves, not by the staff or by the commissioners. Um, I'm going to pause here for a second because I see a question and I'm going to read it. What if the proposed projects, and thank you, Karen, is held at a public school but primarily occurs during after school hours where certain activities are also held during the traditional school hours? That's fine. That would be considered an out of school time project because it primarily is occurring after school at a school premise. I understand that certain activities might happen during school time. That's pretty common, like recruitment activities or presentations or a recruitment, a special workshop, things like that during the school time. That's fine. It would still be considered an out of school time, and that, that would be okay. So yeah, that would be eligible. Um, Great. So next. Oh, unless anybody has any other questions, this is a good moment to pause because I just bombarded you with
I have a
information.
quick question.
Yes, Megan.
Yeah, and hi, how are you?
Good.
Good. So we are a current grantee. We're an FY26 grantee. Do we need to submit our final report for this grant before applying to this one?
No, because the final report is due in November.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think it's the interim report. That's the one that we're really looking into. Some
Okay.
folks, you know, don't have it yet, even though it's due. It was due like in April, or May 4th, I think it was due. We want to make sure that that's all in place and approved, right? Not just submitted, but approved and ready for you to move on to the next stage.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions? If not, I'll just continue moving forward. I know I'm speaking fast, everybody. Um, Okay, so there's a section highlighting culture and community. We are a community-centered agency that is really that really recognizes the importance of equality and community engagement within the arts and humanities. And so we really understand the nuances of the district, and we want to make sure that they're represented. And that that they're committed in sort of the project design, right? That takes place. There is a section on your resources for grant applicants on the website called Highlighting Culture and Community in Your Grant Application. I recommend giving it a click and reading throughout. This is sort of newish um, a component. And so I recommend taking a look at it so that way you have the tools that you need for your grant application. Um, yeah. Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
Something else with like the behavioral science is oftentimes like someone's hyperfixation, the thing that brings them joy, no matter
Is this
what,
a question?
starts to either become all consuming or feel like a task it no longer brings.
I don't know if that's a question. Hi. Okay, great. It's not a question. Awesome. Okay. Moving on. The application, right? So a couple of things that you have to do, right? So we're going to discuss logging into the grant portal, the organization identification. This is kind of new. Eligibility, required documents and uploads, and a scoring criteria. So in order to find the application, right, you're going to go to the main website, the dcarts.gov, and then you're going to click on programs and then go to grants. And from there, you're going to scroll down and you're going to see grant application portal submittable. Once you click on that, submittable will open and you'll see the list of available grant programs that are ready for you to apply. Right now, we are on the top because it's the latest one that just opened, but if more programs open throughout the summer, it'll continue to go down. So just continue, just find it. It's going to be right there. It's called the FY27 Arts and Humanities Education Project. Once you click on apply, you're going to see a link to the RFA on the top, so that way you can download it and read it and take your time with it. And you will also find some links about technical support, etc. This section right here is an organization finder, right? You don't have to be a grantee with us in order to find your organization. This is a database, a national database. And so what I recommend is not putting your name. What I recommend putting is your EIN number. That ensures that there's complete accuracy. I have often found that there are organizations with the same names, just in different states. Also like theater companies. I use theater as an example because I'm a theater person, but that the spelling of the ER and RE is a completely different organization, right? So use your EIN number for this. And once you click on that, you will be able to then apply as a representative of that organization. Um, any questions? I see folks going on mute. I just want to make sure I get time and space. Okay. So this is the important part, eligibility. So you must be a nonprofit with us 501(c)(3) status. You must be registered and authorized to do business in the district. You must have a principal office located in the District of Columbia. A PO box is not enough. You have to have an address, a physical address in the District of Columbia. The project and the programs also must be carried out in the district. So if you're a program that has an office in the district, but the program happens in Virginia, unfortunately, that's not eligible. You must have an active board of directors and comply with all CAH mandates by October 1st. So what does that mean? That means that if you don't have a clean hand certificates, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and by the time of your application, and we review your application, and you get awarded, right? You can still not have a clean hands. As long as your clean hands comes through by October 1st, you're good. We want to make sure because sometimes, that's things that are out of your control. And so we just want to make sure, but we do have to have a deadline, right? October 1st is the latest. So you can still apply if you don't have a clean hands, just connect with me and I'll just put a note on the application that that's in the works. That's the most common example that I can think of. And you must submit all compliance documents in the guidelines that we require. There's more to this. Um, and this is about the clean hands, just must be current in all taxes and liabilities owed to the district or have an approved plan to resolve all taxes as demonstrated by a certification of the citywide clean hands. And of course, be in good standing with the agency. And what does that mean? It means that your reports have been submitted and approved on time. Or late as long as we have approved the extension. And lastly, organizations that have applied for FY27 for the GOS or the General Operating Support may only apply to AHEP, to the Arts and Humanities Education Projects, if you must identify as an arts education organization and your project that you're applying with is completely different from any of the projects that you applied for in your GOS application. So one example of this is if you have a GOS, General Operating Support Grant, and in one of the projects is an after-school program for a device theater program for an after-school theater program, device theater program. And the population age that you're working with are middle school students. And you want to expand that program and now work with high school students, AHEP is a good option. It's a good grant program for you because what we'll be funding is that age and population extension, right? So it has to be different from what you're applying in your GOS. Um, and that can be fuzzy sometimes. That's one of the eligibility questions that comes up the most. But yes. Um, and sometimes folks won't know if you are getting a grant or not. And so I always say apply, you know, we'll be the ones that tell you whether or not you're eligible or not. So this is sort of another chart that sort of tells us and tells you the different grants that you can combine, right? So FY27 GOS recipient may only apply to one project grant and one capacity grant. So you are applying and receiving your GOS, you may apply to one of these. Now you can apply to all of them, but then you're going to have to make a decision as to which one you're going to be moving forward with. And we usually, you'll make that decision before you get before you know how much funds you'll be getting. So this is about mission and priorities for the organization. And of course, you can also have one capacity grant. So you can have a GOS, an AHEP, and a capital project, or a GOS, a field trips and experiences, and a capital project grant. And it's important to note that the GOS recipients are not eligible for the Projects, Events, and Festivals grant, which is the PEF. That's a completely separate grant line. This is a quick note in the application. You'll notice that there's a section on AI, and it's two questions. And so what I'd like to say about those two questions is, to be honest, We are not gonna ding you or punish you for using AI as part of the application, right? In terms of writing the narrative. I think a lot of organizations and people are using AI. We just want to understand how AI is being used. Um, but of course, if you're using AI to create the art, that might be a different question. But we just want to know how you're using AI. And so we ask that you are honest. It's not a punishment if you use AI. Any questions so far?
Actually, yes, I have a question.
Hello, Elizabeth.
And this is because in looking on the website and the requirements for qualifying for applying,
Yeah.
I noticed that there was specifically said that you had to have your 501(c)(3) status for a year by the
Mhm.
grant application date. And we
Yeah.
haven't had ours that long, and I was just wondering about that because I didn't see that with the GOS applications, but we had some other issues, and so I wasn't able to apply for that, and I was really hoping to do this one. We were
Yeah.
existed for a couple of years as a volunteer organization, but only incorporated in October.
Yeah, you must be 501(c)(3) for at least a year by the time of the application. So by July 24th, you needed to have a 501(c)(3) status by July 24th of last year. Um, Anything after that, unfortunately, is not eligible.
Okay, I
Yeah.
was just curious about that because it didn't seem like that was the case for the GOS
UGOS,
application. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that it is as well. It requires a year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just a general rule of the agency, that you must be a 501(c)(3) for at least a year. So, you know,
Okay.
sorry.
Well, thank you for the information
Yeah,
the
sure.
and the program, but I guess I'll sign off now because I'm
Yeah,
ineligible anyway. All right.
yeah, I'm sorry.
All right.
But
Thank
this
you.
is what's good, you're coming in and finding information rather than wasting your
Right.
time.
Yeah, I do
So,
appreciate these workshops. They're very
of
helpful.
course, of
Thank you.
course, my pleasure. It's good to meet you, Elizabeth.
Too.
Um, and so yeah, any other questions, everybody? No? Okay. So the funds, what is this fund? What can you pay with? What are you gonna what can you use it for? So you can pay salaries of arts and humanities professionals for nonprofit organizations. So the executive director who designs the who runs the organization could get some some funds from this. Staff of your organization you could pay with this grant. There's a caveat right at the bottom, right? It should not exceed 35% of the total grant. We really want the funds to go to the project itself, but we understand that a project doesn't just happen, right? They need overhead and maintenance and administration to make it happen. You can pay artists, teaching artists, consultants, contractors that are involved in this project as well. Space rental and fees that are directly related to the project implementation. You can also allocate part of let's say the program happens in your specific location, you can allocate a portion of the grant to pay for that space. Travel and transportation that are directly related to the project. One example of this is that if you have a music class and you are going to take your students to a recording studio to polish the song that they've been working on the entire summer, the travel and transportation to bring the students into that recording studio is covered. You can pay that with a grant, and equipment and purchases that are directly related to the project and equal to no more than 25% of the grant. So if you are, this is a great example. Supplies such as music sheets, uniforms, including an allowable cost? Yes, as long as they're for the project, right? If the uniforms that are, used for something else, we obviously wouldn't pay for those. But yes, of course, of course, of course. Um, Yeah, but one example is that the music class, just to go back to the music class, the music class, let's say you don't want to go to a recording studio, you want to record it yourself in your own space, but you need microphones, and the microphones are super expensive. We don't want you to spend the whole grant on microphones, right? So we are going to limit the equipment purchases to 25% of the grant award. What are things that you cannot spend the money on? So, unfortunately, food and beverages. So, unfortunately, the pizza party at the end or at every day, that's not something that we cover, that we don't pay for. Tuition and scholarships. If you have a student who you want to send to Juilliard because they're so exceptional and you need to support them. Unfortunately, this grant cannot cover that. Re-granting or sub-granting, right? Of these funds that's not allowable. A fundraiser or special event that's meant to bring funds to the organization is not something that we cover. Debt reduction, obviously equipment that exceeds 25% of the grant award. Expenses that are not directly related to the execution of the grant. So, the play that you did that you're gonna do with no students that has nothing to do with it cannot cover. Temporary or permanent public art projects is not something that this grant will cover either. Um, Operational reserve, this money must be spent. And funding to universities, foreign governments, or DC government agencies, including DCPS, is not allowed. Um, any questions about allowable costs? No? Okay. Feel free to use the chat, everybody. Okay, the application process. So organizations must submit one grant applications. All applications are due on July 24th by 5 p.m. And unfortunately, we don't accept applications that are mailed, emailed to us as PDFs or hand delivered to our agency. If you have issues with technology, you can make appointments with me and you can come to our office space and we can support you in submitting the application. Obviously, we don't help write it, but we can help you with that. Um, if you're an organization that needs support with grant writing, we created a list of self-selected grant writers in the district, people who have volunteered, not one of the volunteers, maybe some of them will charge, but but these are folks that just responded to our request for grant writers. And there's a list there, and you can, talk to one of them to see if you need that help and support, especially for smaller organizations. Um, I'm moving on. So what are the mandatory documents? Feels like a lot, but I promise you it actually is not that much. So a balance sheet, certificate of clean hands, certificate of insurance, an organizational budget, IRS letter of determination. I see the question. 990 form, an IRS form W-9, a list of the board of directors, a profit and loss statement, resumes of the people involved in the project, a statement of certification, that's an internal document of the agency, and of course, support materials and work samples. I see a question in the chat that I think it's really good. If we have a DCPS school teacher that works with our project to provide the study hour assistance and additional supervision, could we compensate the teacher as a contractor? The key word there is as a contractor. You can, they have to have a separate contract. So you have to create a separate contract for that person. You cannot underwrite their teacher's salary, their DCPS teacher salary, right? You have to create a separate contract for them that is limited to a specific amount of funds. It's a great questions happen often. This happens often, so I'm glad that it was asked. Yeah. You can, of course, compensate them, but you just have to have a completely separate contract. Next. So work samples. Work samples are a crucial element of any application. They must depict the applicant's strongest arts and humanities output, and they must be able to assess the skill and impact of the work. Work samples are not older than work samples that are older than 3 years may make your application ineligible. So we want to make sure that we're funding programs that are active and that are active in the recent times, right? And so something that you did 5 years ago, just avoid submitting that. Just focus on the last 3 years. Um, and the work samples can be completely utilized to show how the organization and facility is arts-based. Um, of course, there are more ideas on work samples on our guide to grants. There's another document that's in the resources for grants on our website. Um, Support materials. So now the difference between work samples and support materials is work samples is the work that you're putting out as an organization. Support materials are basically documents that are not made by you necessarily. It's more uh, endorsements that you're receiving. So, and additional contacts. So it could be things like a review of the program, letters of recommendation, certificates and awards, letters from parents, testimonials, things like that, evaluations like surveys. These are great supporting materials. That's sort of the difference between those two. Resumes of key personnel. Um, Please include resumes not just of the teaching artist, but also the people that are involved in administrating the grant, right? The executive director or the director of education or whoever is involved out, even outside of the project that touches the project. It's going to help us in a couple of sections that are coming up. You'll see. Couple of sections, this section. So it helps us understand who within the organization has the professional knowledge and work experience to oversee this project into a successful conclusion. So um, it helps us see how the excellent programming that your organization does, that you actually have the capacity to execute this project, and it guarantees that the project will be of high quality. So these are the three questions that we like to pose in terms of whose resume you submit, right? Who's responsible for your organization's arts and humanities output? What's the artistic director, a conductor, a curator? Who's responsible for managing the project itself? So is it the executive director, a director of education, a teaching artist, a contractor? And who is executing the project? Who's actually going and teaching and doing the work with the students? Is it a contractor, a DCPS teacher that's being subcontracted, right? A visiting artist? So those are the sort of wide range of resumes that we'd like to see. In terms of the board of directors, a list of names is not going to be enough for us. We suggest that you include names and roles and responsibilities and the ward that they live in. They don't all have to live in DC, but those that are DC local, we'd like to see where they live. Um, Names alone, it's just not enough context for us to make an informed, decision here. Can an executive director also teach? Of course. You can allocate the funds differently um, when you submit a budget form. You can allocate 20% of this executive director's, or I'm making this number up, right? But could be used for teaching, and then this other percentage for managing the grant. But of course, of course, of course. I mean, even there's some organizations that are really small that, everybody wears many, many hats. So we get it. We get it. In terms of financial picture of the organization, this is kind of important, right? These are documents that helps us see the health of the organization. So we require the following: a balance sheet from the most recently completed fiscal year. A balance sheet is a document that shows us your equity and liabilities, as well as your assets, right? Things, the buildings that the organization owns, the debt that it has. It helps us seize the liquidity of the organization. Profit and loss statement is basically a document showing the revenue and expenses of an organization. We also require that it's the most recently completed fiscal quarter. You don't have to do the whole year. You can just do the last quarter that has been completed. A 990 from the past fiscal year, the latest fiscal year. I know different organizations operate at different calendar years, some fiscal year, calendar year. Just submit the one that's the from your last fiscal year that was completed, your 990. And of course, an organizational budget. So we want to see the current or future fiscal year. We want to see the priorities. We want to see the budget of the entire organization and how it's structured. That's separate from the project budget. Um, Great. The Certificate of Clean Hands. It's a document that you obtain through the Office of Tax and Revenue and the Office of Chief Financial Officer. It's actually quite easy to get. You go to the mytaxdc.gov. I think I put a link in here, and you'll get this PowerPoint, by the way. You're gonna get this later. Um, And it's kind of a newer system. So if you haven't done it in the last 3 years, you may have to apply, like register, and read through the guidelines. But they'll just ask you for your most like recent tax information. And then you usually get a certificate within, usually depends on how where your data is in terms of the district. Sometimes it's right away, sometimes it takes 3 days, but it's pretty quick. Um, yeah, this is what I said earlier. If you can't get one and you're trying really desperately, it's okay. Just let me know that you can't get one. And then you can get one to us before October 1st, but we really need that document. And that's why it's all kind of like bigger. However, without a clean hands, you're unable to receive the funds. Um, Yes, great. How much details do we need to provide in describing the roles of the board of directors? Is it just the officer title, president, vice president as applicable? Yeah, that should be fine. If there's any additional context, like a sentence on each, that's fine too, but you don't have to elaborate too much. The reason why we're requiring this is because in the past, we've just gotten a list of names. John Smith, Mauricio Pita, and I sometimes it's hard to know who they are, but I think the titles is good. Um, you know, so yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for those questions, Karen. They're great. The W-9 form, there are a lot of W-9 forms out there, and there's some folks that use ones that they've had in the past. Just want to make sure that it says March 2024 on the top left corner of the page. That's the most current form. We will send it back if it doesn't have that date, the March 2024 form, which is the last revision of your W-9. And every name that you put in, name of the organization, should match in all of the documents. That's very important. In the section 3, we want to make sure that you're either putting other and put 501(c)(3) or just select the right category, which is a C corporation or an S corporation. The address has to be the physical address. Again, PO box are not acceptable. Your organization's EIN has to be listed, and of course, you have to sign this document with wet ink. You can use an electronic signature, like an Adobe electronic signature that has an Adobe stamp on it. But what we don't accept is typed signatures with like fancy fonts. So we really do require that you either sign it by hand and scan it, or that you do an Adobe sign or a DocuSign. There's like two different kinds that we accept. And then please save all of these documents as PDF. We don't want to get like a Word document that may open differently for panelists to review. The certificate of insurance, we don't want the full policy, we just want a certificate of insurance. It's going to have two things. We're going to require that it has a written waiver of subrogation. All of that's going to be in the application and the RFA. So you just have to contact your insurer and say that to please add a waiver, a written waiver of subrogation against the government of the District of Columbia, its officer, employees, agents, volunteers, contractors, and subcontractors. That's written in the description. Sometimes, they put in a checkbox right next to the policy that's covered. That's fine too. We'd like to have both, ideally. And a certificate holder must be the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities, 200 I Street Southeast, Washington, D.C. 200003. This is a special requirement for AHEP for this particular grant. If your project is you're engaging with youth, with minors, and it's outside of DCPS setting. It's an after-school program that happens in your building. We are requiring that you obtain or have a sexual molestation coverage, which is SAM. That must be listed in the certificate of insurance. If you are an in-school program or an after-school program that happens at a DCPS school, for example, and there's a DCPS teacher in the school, usually that gets covered by the DCPS SAM policy. So we don't require that for those programs. Any questions on documents? No? Okay. So this is the review criteria. This is also listed in the RFA. This is how your application is going to be reviewed and the weight that it's put on. So the most important thing here is the arts and humanities and arts education content, which is 40 points of your application. So these are the things that panelists will be looking at. Is the application demonstrating that it has proficient knowledge of the education standards and practices to achieve success in a project implementation? Are the project goals and activities developmentally appropriate to the intended age grade levels and participant abilities? The applicant is demonstrating the use of appropriately experienced personnel to plan and implement the content. This is where the resumes come in place. The project activities ensure that participants' engagement and advancement through comprehensive lessons. That's why I think a lesson plan is a great work sample. The applicant's work samples and educational materials with a syllabi, lesson plans, rubrics demonstrate high artistic humanities and education standards within the chosen discipline. And this is sort of the biggest, most important section is 40 points, and there's three other criterias that are 20 points each. So capacity and sustainability is another criteria that we look at. So is the applicant demonstrating a skillful project management, organization, and deliverability? The applicant's budget information is detailed, accurate, feasible, and directly related to the activities of the grant request. And the applicant demonstrates the use of appropriate administrative personnel to monitor and track expenditures. This is where all of the financial documents come into place, and as well as the resumes of the executive director, etc., come into place. Community access and engagement. As the commission is prioritizing applicants who give intentional focus to working with populations who have been historically excluded or marginalized, and who demonstrate authentic responsiveness to their identified needs. This project demonstrates that, an educational experience that is inclusive and diverse, either through the content itself or by the composition of the staff who are directly engaging with the participants. The project design demonstrates a commitment to engage all participants by ensuring equity and access and is considering factors such as cultural, socioeconomic, geographical, physical, and intellectual ability. And the applicant outlines a plan for current and or future adjustments to the project based on the evolving needs of the community. So if you have a program that you did last year, one thing that would be really important to note is, what adjustments are being made to and what feedback was received and how has the community responded to the project and what adjustments are you making to ensure that that feedback is implemented for the next time. Community impact is, demonstrating how the project will enrich the arts education community of students, teaching artists, educators, and older adults. The project demonstrates the ability to reach a reasonable number of DCPS and DCPS students, instructional staff, and older adults. And the applicant presents effective evaluation methods that will measure both project impact and effectiveness and participant engagement and development. More on that in a minute. It's basically evaluation and how do you ensure to measure the success of the project itself, which is right here. There's two types of assessments, which is qualitative assessment, which is often subjective, an approach and narrative in nature, so a student testimonial. would be an example of that. And quantitative assessment is data, right? Empirical data that demonstrates that, right? Whether it could be you can do a pre and post testing. You can do a needs assessment. You can do a survey at the beginning and a survey at the end. You can also do observations and form and assessments with, but just by looking and reporting yourself on the changes that you've seen, that would be considered qualitative. Or a portfolio assessment if it's an art form, seeing the work, how it has progressed over time, as well as a focus group. These are just ideas for the types of assessments that we like to see in applications. So what does the review look like? I'm kind of going a little fast, everybody, so just feel free to interrupt me if you need something, okay? Um, so we get the application. We review the application for eligibility, right? If you don't have a 501(c)(3) status, your address is in Maryland. If you are, we look at those things. We look at just compliance and just eligibility. After we decide, okay, this application is eligible, we're going to send it to a panel of experts. That panel of experts will look at the application and they will score the application individually on their own. It's not a comparative scoring process. It's more of a competitive, but not comparative. They're not comparing one application to the other. They're going to create a ranking system. They meet, all the panelists meet in one day and they discuss each of the applications with the opportunity to change their scores. And then once we have the final scores, the staff, myself, the rest of the team will create a funding recommendation. Basically, according to our budget, how much money can we give each of the people, each of the organizations that have been awarded according to the rankings. And then we submit those funding recommendations to the executive director of the agency and the commissioners for them to approve or make changes to the funding recommendations. Again, all the awards are notified by on October 1st or a little after or soon after. The justification may consist of a denial letter if you don't get it, or a grant package, which will include some sort of letter, other documents that we need from you, whether it's an adjusted budget because you received a different kind of money that you were hoping for, or a new agreement that we'd like for you to sign on, or the grant budget itself that provides a timeline of things. So it's basically a package. Um, all of these copies must be sent back to us in order for us to be able to process the grant and give you the funds. Um, and the date of let's just say that you get the grant. Let's just say you get awarded and you submit the documents, a week later. Sometimes it can take us days and sometimes it can take us a little longer. This is depending on um, our funds availability as well as a pipeline of documents. We tend to, last year we were fast, but some organizations have to wait a longer time. And so it's sort of, it really depends on the budget and how soon you are able to send us all of the documents that we need. Um, we recommend that you do direct deposit. It's the only way for us to be able to track where the money is going or where it's at. Mail checks, checks that we send out we don't really send them out. Actually, the district sends them out, and so it's impossible for us to track where they are. So something to note. And there's a way to set that up, and we can help you do that as well. Um, all grantees are subject to monitoring requirements by the agency. So, if you're receiving more than $12,500 in this grant, you are required to submit an interim report and a final report. The interim report is usually sometime in April, and the final report is in November, usually. This includes financials, receipts, as well as a narrative portion. If you receive less than that, you only have to submit a final report at the end of the project. We sometimes like to visit your program. This is not to judge and to see, are they doing the job? It's more because we are partnered with you. We are supporting your project. We want to be involved. We want to cheer on the population that you're working with. This is what we do, what we do. So we want to be a part of it. We want to be a part of it. And of course, we like to stay in touch with you. We like to email, sometimes, or you can call us, report on anything. We like to learn what's going on. So, again, we're just a partner in this. And yeah, all grantees must complete a final report by November. So here's some tips. Sometimes we're allowed to review an application prior to submitting and give you feedback. This feedback is not a guarantee that you're going to get the funds. This is our perspective from experts. We don't tell you what to write. We just say, submit one more work sample. I think it might be good, right? Or we'll say things, you're missing, pictures here. I'm just making things up, right? So we go case by case. Give us some time. Give me at least like 7 days prior to the deadline so I can have enough time to review the application and give you feedback on your application. But again, never a guarantee that this, again, I don't make the decisions. So, um, this is an important point. Pick a project that you think will be feasible with the money that we are able to provide. The max is 30,000. It's tempting to say, I'm going to request a maximum 30,000 because I'm going to use all of this, right? But think about what you actually need, because that could potentially make the application more realistic and more doable. And so the award amount doesn't impact on the success of the application or whether or not you get granted or not. Um, and this is very important. You please be aware that the panel is looking at such a wide range of applications and projects and ideas, right? They are reviewing these in cohorts. So all of the in-school applications will be together, all of the out-of-school applications will be together. Um, and these panelists might not be familiar with your organization or the specifics of your project. So um, give them a sense, talk to them as if it's somebody that you have never met them, but don't assume that they know who you are. Don't assume that they know internal lingo or internal language or vocabulary. Earlier, I said the word devised theater. That is a very internal term. So if I was applying for a program like that, I would be specific as to what that means. I know we have a minute. Almost there, I promise. Sorry, everybody. Um, Attachments and work samples. Restrict the video to very short, 2 minutes. You can do 3 minutes. Um, and upload them as hard files. Do not include YouTube links. We actually enforce this rule to panelists. They're not allowed to click on links or anything outside of the four corners of the application. Um, all documents, if best, make them all PDFs. If you have multiple resumes, make them into one file. Don't avoid submitting 5 different files for each of the resumes. If you can combine them into one and say key resumes of the application, that's going to make the panelist more comfortable and it's easier for them to review the number of applications that we get. Again, do not submit a list of links. These are all the videos and here's all the links. They will not click on them. We want you to download an MP4 or an MOV and and upload those documents. And when you are about to submit your application, just make sure that everything appears as you want it to appear. One thing, I don't think there's formatting in the application in the text for your narrative. So just make sure that, you're not relying on bolding or underlining or things like that. These are just tips. As you're working on this application, create a folder on your desktop, on your computer that says AHEP, FY27, and just put everything in there, work samples, so that way you have everything in one place, even if you have it somewhere else. That way, when it comes time for the deadline, you're not rushing through sort of get everything together. And I would always review the list of mandatory documents before you click submit. Because it's like, oh my God, I missed the one document. Oh my God. And I can't find it. Um, I also recommend downloading the list of questions of the application. You can do that in Submittable, and draft them in an external document rather than on the portal, and then copy and pasting the text into the portal. That's going to ensure that that the portal is not, because you never know what could happen on a platform. Things could be deleted, like No, be in charge of your document. Keep a copy of the review criteria nearby. That's on the RFA. It can help you assess, oh, am I addressing all of the points that they're requesting, right? And to read it back and you compare it, then you're able to have a stronger application that way. And this is a really important tip. Have somebody outside of your application or your discipline, friend that doesn't know who you are, doesn't know what you do at all, and have them read the application. This can help them see sort of if things are clear rather than internal lingo or like somebody who already knows a little bit of what you do, and so they have that context. Somebody without context is the best way. And that's it. Do we have, thank you, everybody. All right, any questions that we have? I know I spoke a lot, so I'm sure there are questions, and I'm happy to stay a little bit longer for questions and be specific. And that's my contact.
I have one.
Yes, hi, Lauren.
Hey,
Sorry.
Mauricio, good to see you.
Thank you.
Um, if we applied for the general operating back in May,
Hmm.
and in that application we outlined all of our programs,
Hmm.
um, obviously AHEP, you don't want to double up on the program, but since we're not sure if we receive that grant, would you suggest us pitching a program that we may have put into that grant for AHEP or just something completely new so that there's not this chance of like double dipping, I guess. Did I ask that okay?
Yeah, so I see your point. So you haven't, the organization has not received GOS in the past?
No, we just got AHEP this past year, so this year was the first year we were eligible for
Right.
GOS.
So what I would do, so that's a great example. If you, oh, great, thank you, Megan. If you receive GOS, you just won't get, if it's the same program, you just won't get AHEP. If you want to get both, I would suggest changing AHEP to be something that the organization hasn't done or an extension of something that was in the GOS application.
So
But
basically like a new program or something we're starting or we haven't gotten funds for before.
correct. Or if there's a program already in the organization that was part of GOS, a modifier, right? Something that can expand the population or something that's specific to a project that, yeah, that could enhance something that
Okay.
you're already doing. But yeah, it has to be
Like
completely different.
enhance, expand, or modify an existing.
Yeah, like I said earlier, like a different population with the same project or program or a different site or, different things like
Okay.
that. But, I'll tell you this, GOS, usually the funding for GOS is much larger than AHEP. So usually GOS is based on budget and expenditures, not on a set amount like we set
Mhm.
for AHEP.
Okay. I
Yeah,
appreciate it, Mauricio.
of course. Of course. Any other questions? And yeah, there's no bad questions. You can even ask like, what's the commission again? Just kidding, no. We've had that. Well, if there are not any questions, I would like to give you your evening back, your afternoon back. Again, my contact information is right there. You feel free to email me. That's the best way. And I'm happy to answer any questions again offline. I'm also happy to meet with you if you want to, say you have 30 minutes to talk to me about this specific project and whether or not it's eligible. I'm happy to do that. I'm also happy to review applications prior to submission. Like I said, 7 days before the submission. If you send it to me, I'm happy to give you feedback on your application. But again, no guarantee. But with that, I want to thank everyone for coming to this workshop. And you have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thanks, Mauricio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody.